When a person finally walks away from what once held them captive, the world around them changes, especially the people who believed you would always stay exactly where they left you. There is a quiet power in moving on, a kind of transformation that doesn't announce itself with noise, but with a calm certainty that you deserve better than the pain you once carried. And nothing unsettles those who wounded you more than the realization that their power over you has expired. They expected your heart to remain tangled in old memories. They expected your spirit to remain tied to old wounds. They expected your loyalty to keep you trapped in places you had long outgrown. But you did something they never imagined. You healed. People become furious not because you left, but because your absence forces them to confront the truth they tried so desperately to avoid. They become angry because your movement exposes their stagnation. Your peace reveals their chaos. Your growth highlights their refusal to change. You stepping forward becomes a mirror they cannot bear to look into, because it exposes the emptiness of the control they once enjoyed. They are not furious that you moved on. They are furious that you no longer orbit around their expectations. You see, there is a strange discomfort that settles in the hearts of those who benefited from your silence. When you stop explaining yourself, when you stop begging to be understood, when you stop trying to mend what they repeatedly broke, something inside them panics. They realize too late that the version of you they took for granted will never return. And nothing terrifies them more than the version of you who finally recognizes your own value. When you move on, you become a reminder of everything they mishandled. Every step you take forward becomes a silent testimony of what they lost through their own choices. And though they may never say it openly, your progress burns them from the inside. They expected your life to crumble without them, but instead you rose higher. They expected you to chase them, but instead you chose yourself. They expected your heart to stay wounded, but instead you let it heal, and that reversal of fate stirs a bitterness they cannot hide. Their fury is not really about you. It is about the illusion they can no longer protect. They crafted a world where they were important, where they were irreplaceable, where your whole being revolved around their presence. But when you stepped out of their shadow, when you reclaimed your time, your peace, your spirit, you shattered the narrative they built for themselves. You became a living contradiction to the story they told, both to others and to themselves. And nothing enrages a person more than losing the script they thought they controlled. But hidden beneath their anger is fear. Fear that you will find someone who cherishes you the way they never did. Fear that you will build a life where their name no longer fits. Fear that your healing will reveal the harm they caused. Fear that your strength will expose their weakness. They fear your freedom because it means they cannot define you anymore. And when they lose the ability to define you, they lose the ability to diminish you. Moving on is not an act of revenge. It is a declaration that your soul refuses to remain imprisoned. And though they may rage, blame, gossip, or twist the truth, none of their reactions can undo the quiet miracle that has already happened inside you. You chose to live again. You chose to walk forward, even when your legs trembled. You chose to embrace peace, even when chaos tried to pull you back. You chose to trust the future more than the familiarity of brokenness. And that, your courage, your healing, your refusal to return, is what infuriates them most. When you finally begin to heal, something powerful and often unsettling happens. The people who once relied on your brokenness start to lose their grip on your life. Healing is not just a personal transformation. It is a shift in the entire atmosphere around you. It is the quiet rewriting of your story, the reclaiming of your voice, and the gentle dismantling of the invisible chains that once held you bound to people who did not know how to value you. And this shift, this internal rising, exposes something they never wanted you to see, The control they believed they had over your emotions was always fragile, always temporary, always dependent on your willingness to stay wounded. For a long time you may have carried the pain they caused as if it were a burden you had to protect. You explained yourself when you didn't need to. You apologized when you were the one hurt. You waited for closure that never came. You held on to people who were only holding on to the version of you that served their comfort. As long as you were uncertain, confused, or emotionally dependent, they felt safe, they felt important, they felt relevant. Your suffering, in a twisted way, validated the role they played in your life. But healing changes the equation. Healing is not loud, it does not make announcements. It begins quietly, like a whisper in your soul that says, you deserve better than this. At first you may ignore it, you may doubt it, yet little by little it grows stronger. You begin to question why you've stayed in certain situations for so long. You begin to see patterns you once excused. You begin to understand the difference between love and attachment, between loyalty and self-sacrifice, between patience and allowing yourself to be mistreated. And the moment you start to recognize these truths, you begin to detach from the emotional grip they once had on you. Your healing exposes something they were never prepared to face. They were never as powerful in your life as they believed. They were powerful only because you allowed access to your heart. They were influential only because you cared deeply. They were impactful only because you believed in them, defended them, forgave them, and hoped they would one day see your worth. When that hope begins to fade, when the fog begins to lift, when your spirit begins to whisper for freedom, their throne collapses. They lose the illusion that they controlled your story. And this loss infuriates them, not because they wanted to help you, but because your healing takes away the version of you that made their ego feel tall. When you heal, you no longer respond the way they expect. What once triggered you no longer does. What once shattered you now barely shakes you. What once made you chase now makes you walk away. You no longer ask for explanations. You no longer seek approval. You no longer place their feelings above your own well-being. Your healing teaches you emotional boundaries, and boundaries are the enemy of those who used your kindness for their convenience. They begin to realize that the emotional reactions they once provoked so easily are gone. The arguments they used to pull you into no longer interest you. The apologies you used to wait for no longer matter. The validation you once begged for now seems small compared to the peace you're learning to carry. And because they cannot control your heart anymore, they try to control the narrative. They get angry, they blame you. They say you changed as if growth were a crime. They accuse you of being cold or selfish. But beneath their accusations lies a deeper truth. They are terrified of the strength you have found. Your healing confronts them with a mirror they never wanted to look into. It reveals the truth about their behavior, their choices, and their treatment of you. When you are no longer emotionally available to absorb their wounds, they must face the emptiness within themselves. Healing does not just expose them, it exposes everything they refused to acknowledge. And this is why they become furious. Not because you moved on too fast, not because you changed too much, but because your healing proves they never had the hold on your life they imagined. You were never theirs to control. You were simply someone who loved deeply, forgave easily, and hoped sincerely. Once your eyes opened, once your heart strengthened, once you decided that peace mattered more than pleasing people, their influence dissolved. Healing is the greatest rebellion against those who profited from your pain. It is the quiet revolution that reveals the truth. They never held you. Your hope did. And now that hope belongs to your future, not to them. Peace changes a person in ways that words can hardly describe. It softens what was once tense, steadies what once trembled, and restores what was once fractured. When someone reaches that place of inner calm, true, steady, unshakable calm, it becomes something others cannot easily ignore, especially those who contributed to the storms you had to survive. They watch you now with an uneasiness they try to hide, because the peace you walk in reveals the very chaos they still carry within themselves. Your newfound calm unsettles people who once expected you to remain reactive. They were used to the old version of you, the one who was exhausted, overwhelmed, and constantly fighting battles you never deserved. They remember the you who over-explained, over-apologized, over-gave, and overstayed. They grew comfortable with the noise in your life because it kept you distracted, emotional, and easier to manipulate. But the moment you embraced peace, the moment something inside you decided that serenity mattered more than sustaining connections built on tension, the balance shifted. Your peace exposes the contrast. It highlights a difference they never wanted to confront. When your heart stops being chaotic, theirs suddenly becomes more noticeable. When your mind quiets, the noise in theirs becomes louder. When your spirit rests, their unrest feels sharper, and that contrast irritates them in a way they often cannot explain. They may try to dismiss it, deny it, or blame you for changing, but deep down they feel what they cannot name. Your calm has become a mirror they are afraid to look into. A peaceful person carries a different presence. You stop rushing to please, you stop defending your worth, you stop reacting to negativity with desperation. Instead, you answer slowly, you think clearly, you set boundaries calmly. You walk away silently from things that once drained you. You let silence speak for you. And this maturity, this new equilibrium, makes them confront a question they never wanted to ask. Why am I still chaotic while they are becoming whole? People who benefit from your unrest never celebrate your peace. Your turmoil once made them feel justified, superior, or in control. Your emotional wounds kept you dependent on their opinions and validation. But peace takes that dependence away. Peace teaches you to trust your own judgment. Peace teaches you that calm decisions are better than emotional reactions. Peace teaches you that silence can protect you more than arguments ever could. And because of this, those who rely on your chaos feel exposed when they see you standing still and unmoved. Your peace reveals their unresolved issues. Suddenly the games they used to play don't work on you. The triggers they used to pull no longer have effect. The drama they try to start doesn't invite you anymore. You don't feel the need to defend yourself. You don't feel the urgency to prove your intentions. You don't feel compelled to give time and energy to battles that no longer concern your spirit. And every time you choose calm over conflict, it reminds them of the internal battles they still haven't won. What unsettles them most is the quiet strength in your eyes. A person who has made peace with themselves carries a depth that is impossible to imitate. You no longer break easily. You no longer fear letting go. You no longer cling to what hurts you. This scares them because it proves that you have discovered a strength they never believed you would find. Your peace becomes a sign of evolution, and their frustration becomes a sign of stagnation. Some people don't get angry because you are peaceful. They get angry because they can't disturb that peace anymore. They can't pull you back into old arguments. They can't influence your emotions like before. They can't make you respond in ways that fed their ego. Your calm takes away the power they once had. And when a person loses that kind of control, fury rises in them like a quiet storm. Your peace is a sign that you have reclaimed your inner world. They feel pressured by it because it forces them to notice the disorder they carry inside, and instead of confronting their own chaos, they project their discomfort onto you. They may mock your calmness, question your motives, or accuse you of being detached. But none of that changes the truth. Your peace is simply exposing what they refuse to heal. Peaceful soul becomes a silent reminder that healing is possible, that growth is real, and that transformation happens when a person chooses themselves. And while they may be unsettled by the calm you now hold, your peace is the clearest evidence that you have outgrown the emotional storms they once kept you trapped in. Growth has a way of revealing truths that people try desperately to hide, and nothing exposes their regrets more than watching you rise beyond the place where they left you. When someone sees you stepping into a better version of yourself, stronger, wiser, calmer, more focused, it awakens a realization they were never prepared to face. Your growth becomes a quiet reminder of the opportunities they mishandled. The more you evolve, the more they are forced to confront how poorly they treated a soul that only ever offered sincerity. Every step you take forward highlights the parts of your story they underestimated. They never believed you would outgrow the pain they caused. They never thought you would heal wounds they created. They assumed your heart would remain stuck in a cycle of longing, confusion, and emotional dependence. Your growth disrupts that assumption. It proves that you were only waiting for the right moment to reclaim your strength. Instead of breaking under pressure, you rebuilt yourself. Instead of staying wounded, you learned. Instead of depending on their approval, you developed a deeper sense of self. Growth is a gentle, steady force. It doesn't announce itself loudly. It moves quietly through your decisions. Letting go of what drains you, choosing peace over chaos, valuing your time, protecting your energy, and honoring your worth. These small shifts build into something unmistakable, something they cannot ignore. And suddenly, while watching you become someone they can no longer manipulate, a discomfort grows inside them, not because they wanted to help you, but because your transformation shines light on everything they failed to appreciate when they had access to you. Your progress reminds them of the effort they never made, the kindness they dismissed, the loyalty they took for granted, the patience they misread as weakness, the love, friendship, or support they mishandled because they believed you would never leave. When you evolve beyond the version of yourself they once knew, it forces them to see that their place in your life was a privilege, not a guarantee. People become angry at your growth because it strips away the illusion that they were better than you. Now, they must watch you step into a life where their presence is no longer required. Growth also reveals the maturity they lacked. While you were learning how to manage your emotions, they were avoiding theirs. While you were confronting your insecurities, they were hiding behind pride. While you were rebuilding your peace, they were holding on to chaos. When two people take different paths, one choosing healing and the other choosing comfort in dysfunction, the distance between them widens naturally. And when they finally notice that distance, anger becomes their first defense. It is easier for them to blame your growth than to confront their stagnation. Your transformation speaks in a language they cannot silence. It tells the truth without you needing to say a word. It shows how deeply you cared. It shows how much you endured. It shows how long you fought for what was already fading. But it also shows the strength you found after walking away. The moment you decided you deserved more was the moment they lost the advantage they once held. Growth reveals that their absence did not destroy you. It freed you. It gave you space to breathe, to think clearly, to rebuild what they once shattered. What unsettles them most is the realization that you did not need them to become who you are now. Your achievements, your healing, your stability, none of it relied on their presence. And that truth wounds their pride. They imagined themselves as irreplaceable, Yet your growth proves that life moved forward in their absence, and it moved forward beautifully. This is why they become frustrated when they see you glowing, thriving, or simply at peace. It reminds them that they were never the source of your strength. They were merely the obstacle you had to overcome to discover it. Your growth exposes what they refused to see when they had you, that a person with a sincere heart is a blessing, and losing someone like that is a loss time cannot repair. And now, with every step you take into a better life, they must live with the quiet understanding that your evolution is the consequence of their neglect. Their anger is nothing more than grief in disguise, grief for a version of you they will never get back. Silence becomes a different kind of language when a person finally understands their worth. You learn that not every battle deserves your voice, not every accusation deserves your defense, and not every misunderstanding deserves your energy. At some point, you realize that your peace is too valuable to keep placing in the hands of those who never handled it with care. That realization transforms silence into strength, a strength far greater than anything your explanations ever accomplished. And this is what unsettles the people who once depended on your reactions. When you were constantly trying to explain your intentions, they were comfortable. When you kept defending yourself against false assumptions, they felt powerful. When you tried to fix the bridge every time it burned, they believed your effort meant weakness. Your explanations gave them access to your heart, your mind, your time, your emotional world. The more you tried to prove yourself, the more they felt entitled to question you. But silence changes the dynamics completely. The moment you stop explaining is the moment they realize the conversation they controlled has come to an end. Silence removes the stage they used to perform on. Silence denies them the attention they relied on. Silence shows that you have withdrawn your energy from battles that were never yours to fight. And when explanation is replaced by silence, they cannot manipulate the narrative anymore. They cannot twist your words when you refuse to give any. They cannot provoke reactions when your heart has grown too calm to engage. They cannot keep the argument alive when you have chosen peace over proving a point. Your silence becomes a boundary they never expected you to hold. And boundaries are terrifying to those who benefited from their absence. People who depend on your emotional responses feel threatened when you no longer respond. Your silence forces them to sit with the truth they tried to avoid. It makes them face their behavior without the distraction of your voice. It reveals the weight of what they did, because now your stillness highlights every wrong turn they took. Silence magnifies the consequences they never thought would catch up to them. When you stop explaining, you are quietly saying, "My value is not up for debate anymore." You are saying, "I do not owe you the justification you keep demanding." You are saying, "If you cannot see my heart, my words won't help you." And this shift, this refusal to continue participating in conversations that go nowhere, infuriates them. Why? Because silence takes away the control they once exercised over your emotions. They can no longer pull you into arguments at their convenience. They can no longer provoke you into emotional reactions that made them feel superior. They can no longer distort your meaning when you refuse to speak. Your silence exposes their intentions. When you stop explaining, what they truly wanted from you becomes clear. Not understanding, not reconciliation, but power. Silence becomes your shield. It protects your dignity. It preserves your peace. It reminds you that your time and energy are sacred. And when someone realizes they can no longer shake you, they panic. They fear losing the ability to influence your thoughts. They fear being unable to guilt-trip you back into old patterns. They fear the quiet confidence you now carry. Your silence becomes undeniable evidence that you have grown, and growth is something they cannot control. They start to interpret your silence as arrogance or indifference, when in truth it is healing, it is wisdom, it is emotional maturity. It is the understanding that peace matters more than being right. It is the acceptance that not everyone deserves a seat at the table of your inner world. But because they don't know the language of peace, they misinterpret your quietness as an attack. They become angry not because you wronged them, but because they no longer have access to manipulate your emotional state. Silence is not withdrawal, it is elevation. When you stop explaining, you step out of the old story they kept rewriting. You refuse to repeat cycles that exhausted your spirit. You decide that clarity within yourself is enough, even if others choose confusion. And this terrifies them because it means their hold on you has been broken. The voice you took back by choosing silence is stronger than any speech you ever gave. Absence has a weight that words cannot carry. It speaks in ways the tongue never could. When you finally walk away from places where your soul was mishandled, your absence becomes the reminder they cannot silence. It forces people to sit with the consequences they once thought they would never face. As long as you stayed, they could pretend their behavior wasn't damaging, their choices didn't hurt, and their actions didn't push you away. But the moment you stepped back, truly stepped back, the reality of what they lost settled over them like a shadow they couldn't outrun. Your absence is not empty. It is filled with every moment you gave, every kindness you offered, every patience you extended, every chance you allowed. It carries the memory of everything they misused while believing you would always stay. When you were present, they could ignore the value of your heart. When you continued trying, they could dismiss your efforts. But when you walked away, that void began to echo in places they thought you would always fill. The truth is, they never imagined a life where your presence no longer revolved around them. They believed you would always answer when they called. They believed you would always forgive when they crossed boundaries. They believed you would always bend so they didn't have to change. Your presence made them comfortable, but your absence uncovers their discomfort, an ache born from the realization that someone who once cared deeply finally reached the end of their endurance. As they did so, they believed they could finally reach the end of their endurance. Absence confronts them with silence they cannot negotiate with. It reveals the truth without your voice. It forces them to look at themselves, not through your explanations, but through the consequences of their own actions. And the more they feel that void, the more they are reminded that losing someone who loved sincerely is not a small loss. It is a fracture that echoes through every corner of their life. People often believe they can treat someone carelessly and still expect permanence. They assume that your good heart guarantees your loyalty, as if love were a prison rather than a choice. But when your patience ends, when your spirit decides it has carried enough weight, when your heart recognizes that staying is no longer healing, it is your absence that teaches them the lesson they refuse to learn through your presence. The void you leave behind carries a truth sharper than any confrontation. You were the one holding the connection together. You were the one putting in the effort. You were the one trying to understand and fix and soothe and restore. Without your effort, the relationship collapses, and in that collapse they finally see what they denied for so long, that you were never the problem. You were the foundation they kept cracking while expecting the structure to stand. Your absence confronts their ego. It challenges the story they told themselves about being irreplaceable. When they look around and realize that life feels smaller without you, when they sense a quietness that wasn't there before, when they notice the emotional warmth you once brought is now gone, it disrupts their pride. They expected you to chase, to fix, to to fight. But you did none of that. You chose yourself. And that choice strikes deeper than any argument ever could. Absence has a way of revealing true character. People who once dismissed you begin to recognize your value. Those who took advantage of your kindness start to feel the coldness of losing it. Those who played with your emotions begin to feel the emptiness of their own. Your absence becomes a teacher, one that arrives without anger, without revenge, without noise. It teaches by removing what was never appreciated. And as they sit with that realization, something inside them begins to crumble. Not because they love you, not always, but because they lost access to someone who made life easier for them, someone who listened, someone who cared, someone who forgave, someone whose presence made everything feel softer. Now they must face the truth that your departure is not the punishment. It is the result. It is what happens when someone finally understands that staying in a place that wounds them is a betrayal of their own soul. Your absence forces them to confront the truth they avoided. You were the blessing, and losing you was the consequence they created with their own hands. A story loses its power the moment the character refuses to play the role assigned to them. That is what happened when you began to move forward with strength instead of staying trapped in the narrative they shaped for you. They had grown accustomed to thinking they understood you completely, that they could predict your next step, your next reaction, your next mistake. They wrote a script in their minds where you remained stuck, dependent, broken, apologetic, unsure of yourself. But the moment you stepped into your growth, the moment your heart awakened to its own value, that carefully crafted narrative began to crumble. Your evolution destroyed the story they used to justify their behavior. They once believed they could define you by your wounds. They assumed your mistakes would hold you hostage. They expected your pain to keep you silent. Their version of you was small, smaller than your potential, smaller than your purpose, smaller than your soul. And as long as you accepted that version, they felt powerful, they felt right, they felt justified. But when you began to rewrite yourself, when you refused to remain the character they invented, your transformation became a threat. Your growth is not loud. It speaks in subtle ways they cannot escape. You stop apologizing for your existence. You stop allowing guilt to bend your spine. You stop offering explanations that only served their convenience. You begin to create distance where chaos once lived. You prioritize your peace over their approval. These quiet shifts unsettle them because your independence contradicts everything they believed about you. People become frustrated when they lose control of the narrative, especially when that narrative allowed them to feel superior. They are irritated by the realization that you are not who they told others you were. Your success confronts their lies. Your progress contradicts their assumptions. Your healing disproves their judgments. With every step you take forward, the story they once repeated so confidently becomes less believable, even to themselves. In their narrative, you were supposed to remain broken, but you healed. In their narrative, you were supposed to stay hurt, but you grew. In their narrative, you were supposed to depend on them, but you learned to stand alone. In their narrative, you were supposed to come crawling back, but you walked away with dignity. This reversal creates an uneasiness they try to mask with anger. They accuse you of changing too much, too fast, too suddenly. But what they truly mean is that your change exposes the truth they wanted hidden. They treated you as if you had no other place to go. And now, witnessing your transformation, they must confront the reality that they misjudged the strength of your spirit. Your growth holds up a mirror they've avoided for years. It reflects their carelessness. It reflects their ego. It reflects the cruelty they excused. It reflects the imbalance of a connection built on their comfort and your sacrifice. When they see you thriving despite the storms you endured, it reveals what they should have cherished but didn't. And nothing frustrates a person more than realizing they lost someone who was never meant to be taken for granted. The story you now live is not the one they designed. It is one you wrote with your own hands, through pain, through reflection, through healing, through courage. You learned to see yourself clearly, not through the distorted lens they held up to you. You stopped shrinking yourself to fit inside their expectations. And this newfound clarity dismantles the false image they once projected onto you. Your transformation challenges the stability of their identity. People who rely on being above you cannot handle watching you rise. They become threatened because your strength highlights their weakness. Your clarity exposes their confusion. Your emotional maturity reveals their avoidance. They feel small beside someone they once thought they towered over. What they fail to understand is that your growth was never about proving them wrong. It was about proving to yourself that you deserved more than the life their narrative allowed you to live. Your evolution is a testimony to resilience, a testimony to the quiet work of the soul, a testimony to the truth that no narrative can imprison a person who has learned their own worth. Their frustration is simply the echo of a story that no longer holds power over you. The script they wrote has been torn, rewritten, and replaced, not with revenge, but with rebirth. Your life now moves in a direction they never imagined, and that movement is the very thing that dismantles the illusion they once depended on. Your growth did not destroy the truth, it revealed it. Strength is often misunderstood, especially by those who believed your gentleness was a sign of weakness. They misread your patience as surrender, your compassion as naivety, and your loyalty as dependence. They assumed your softness meant you could be controlled, shaped, or manipulated. But when life forced you to grow, when pain sharpened your awareness, when betrayal strengthened your spirit, something inside you awakened. And that awakening exposed the weakness they tried so hard to hide behind arrogance. Some people walk through life wearing confidence like a mask. They stand tall, speak loudly, and act as though nothing can shake them. But beneath that surface lies insecurity, an insecurity they hoped you would never see. You were never meant to rise in their eyes. You were meant to remain beneath them, needing their approval, believing their opinions, accepting their treatment. But when you discovered your inner strength, when you stopped bending under their expectations, the mask they wore began to crack. Your strength confronts the illusions they built to protect their ego. The moment you stood up for yourself, their authority faded. The moment you stopped seeking their validation, their importance diminished. The moment you walked away from their manipulation, their power dissolved. And while they try to pretend they are unfazed, your strength makes them uncomfortable in ways they struggle to articulate. Your rise is not loud or dramatic. It is quiet and steady, like someone who finally understands who they are and what they deserve. That kind of strength is not found in shouting or demanding attention. It is found in self-respect, in discipline, in knowing when to walk away, in refusing to lower your standards just to keep someone close. This strength shakes them because it exposes how fragile their confidence truly was. They once believed they had the upper hand. They believed their opinions defined you. They believed their presence dictated your worth. But now your strength shows the opposite, that their confidence depended on keeping you small. Every time you grew, every time you healed, every time you learned to love yourself more deeply, Their sense of superiority slipped further away. The pedestal they placed themselves on begins to wobble when they see you rising to heights they never thought you would reach. Your strength highlights the contrast they hoped would stay hidden. You confront your emotions while they hide behind theirs. You admit your flaws while they pretend they have none. You strive to grow while they cling to the comfort of staying the same. And this contrast reveals the truth. You were never weak. They were simply unprepared to face the strength you would one day become. Nothing exposes a person's weakness more clearly than watching someone they underestimated evolve into someone independent, grounded, and unshakable. Your transformation shows them that arrogance is not strength. It is fear disguised as confidence. It is the fear of losing control, the fear of being seen for who they truly are, the fear of recognizing that the person they dismissed is now standing taller than their expectations ever allowed. You no longer react to their attempts to provoke you. You no longer fall into their emotional traps. You no longer become small to make them feel big. This terrifies them because your strength leaves no room for their manipulation. They cannot intimidate someone who is no longer afraid. They cannot belittle someone who knows their worth. They cannot control someone who understands how to walk away. Your strength becomes a mirror, reflecting their shortcomings. They see someone who survived wounds they caused, someone who rebuilt after heartbreak they contributed to, someone who grew through the pain they thought would define you forever. And that truth unsettles them because it exposes their failure, not just as a partner, a friend, or a family member, but as a human being who lacked the courage to grow alongside you. The version of you they tried to break is gone. In its place stands someone who refuses to settle, someone who refuses to shrink, someone who refuses to hand their power to people who have not earned it. Your strength is not revenge, it is transformation. It is the quiet declaration that your soul has risen above the shadows they once cast over you. Their weakness was never your responsibility to carry, and now that you no longer carry it, they cannot hide it. Your strength reveals what they always feared, that you were meant to rise, and they were never prepared to witness it. Choosing yourself is one of the most powerful decisions a person can make, yet it is also the one that provokes the deepest fury in those who once relied on your self-neglect. When you finally decide to value your own peace, to protect your own heart, to honor your own soul, the people who benefited from your lack of boundaries feel the shift before anyone else. They sense the change in your tone, in your silence, in the distance you now place between yourself and the chaos you once tolerated, and that change terrifies them. Not because they are losing you, but because they are losing the version of you who allowed them to take without giving back. Your decision to choose yourself breaks a cycle they thought would continue forever, a cycle where you apologized first, even when you were hurt, a cycle where you forgave quickly, even when they showed no remorse, a cycle where your love was unconditional while their love was selective. They grew accustomed to a dynamic in which you were the giver and they were the taker. You held the relationship together while they pulled it apart. You did the emotional labor while they enjoyed the comfort of your effort. To them, your kindness was a doorway they could walk through any time they pleased. But kindness is not weakness, and when you finally recognize the difference, everything changed. Choosing yourself means learning to say no, even when your heart trembles. It means walking away from conversations designed to manipulate you. It means refusing to sacrifice your mental and emotional health just to keep someone else comfortable. These choices disrupt the pattern they depended on. They once believed they could stretch your boundaries until they disappeared. They believed you would always remain patient while they repeated the same injuries. They believed your need for connection was stronger than your need for self-respect. But choosing yourself proves them wrong. Vision brings clarity they never expected. It reveals the truth about how one-sided things had become. It reveals the emotional imbalance they insisted on maintaining. It reveals the parts of your soul you kept quiet just to keep the peace. And when you stop participating in your own diminishing, they are forced to confront the harsh reality that their behavior was the reason you had to reclaim your life. The loss of control is what truly fuels their anger. They can no longer rely on guilt to pull you back. They can no longer use silence to punish you. They can no longer twist your love into justification for their selfishness. When you choose yourself, their manipulation loses its effect, and that powerlessness in them becomes a storm you can feel even from a distance. People who depend on your self-betrayal always fear the moment you wake up. They fear the moment you see your own worth clearly. They fear the moment you learn how to set boundaries. They fear the moment you stop explaining your decisions. They fear the moment you no longer need their approval. They fear the moment you realize peace is more important than proximity. Your growth becomes a reminder that you were never the problem. You were the one trying to hold everything together. And once you step back, the truth becomes undeniable. The imbalance collapses without you. Choosing yourself also reveals something deeper. They never expected you to have the courage to walk away from what hurt you. They believed their presence mattered more to you than your well-being. They believed your heart was too soft to leave. They believed your hope was too strong to fade. They believed your love was too loyal to seek better. But courage grows quietly inside a wounded person. One day, it becomes stronger than the attachment, stronger than the fear, stronger than the longing. When you finally choose yourself, the cycle ends, not with noise, not with revenge, not with anger, but with clarity. A clarity they will feel long before they admit it. Your absence, your silence, your boundaries, your peace, these become the evidence that their place in your life was never permanent. It was conditional on respect, honesty, and mutual effort. And now that you honor yourself, they cannot use you. Now that you love yourself, they cannot diminish you. Now that you protect yourself, they cannot drain you. Their fury is just the shadow left behind when someone loses access to a heart they never learned to cherish. Choosing yourself is not abandonment, it is awakening. And once awakened, you can never be controlled the same way again. In the end, their fury is nothing more than proof of your freedom. They are not angry because you failed them. They are angry because you finally stopped failing yourself. You rose from a place they expected you to die in. You found strength in wounds they thought would define you forever. You created a new life in spaces where they believed you had no future, and though they may never admit it, your growth has become the undeniable evidence of a truth they fought to ignore. You were always meant to outgrow them. Let them be furious, let them whisper. Let them rewrite stories to soothe their pride. None of it can reach you anymore, because you've stepped into a life where their opinions hold no weight, where their absence is no longer a wound, where their judgment no longer feels like a cage. You have reclaimed the pen of your own story. You have reclaimed the dignity they overlooked. You have reclaimed the peace they tried to disturb. Live boldly, heal deeply, move forward without apology. The world ahead of you is wider than the one you left behind, and the person you are becoming is far greater than the one they tried to contain. Your new life is not built on their understanding, it's built on your awakening. And the greatest victory you could ever offer is this simple truth: you kept growing anyway.